A few years ago, I had a website that I created that wasn't getting any traction. It looked good, but people just weren't signing up like I hoped they would. This meant I had a very unhappy client. I decided to use a technique that identified a couple of changes I could make, and this eventually led to the numbers skyrocketing. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use it too, and all you need is a pen and some paper. You might not realize it, but the tool I'm talking about is used around you every day. In the websites you visit, the apps you use, things like Netflix and Uber and Instagram and WhatsApp and even your banking app. Technically, if I got up now and went downstairs to make a cup of coffee, this is one too. Or if I decided to go out and jump in the car, there's another one. I'm talking about user flows. What, I hear you ask? They're just simple maps, aren't they? A route a user takes to get from point A to point B. Well, yes and no. If you're not applying user flows to the work you're doing already, here's a few good reasons that you should probably start. Reason number one, you'll misunderstand the user. Without user flows, there's a pretty good chance that you won't understand how your user's interacting with your product or service, which is exactly what I did with my failing website. Reason number two, overlooking pain points. If you don't understand why people are using your product, you probably won't be able to understand the pain points they have. Reason number three, poor usability. If you don't have a clear picture of the journey you want to take your users on, then there's a good chance you'll overcomplicate it, which will probably frustrate your users and they'll disappear before they reach their goal. Reason number four, confusion amongst your team members. When I handed off my bad design to the developer, there was a load of back and forth between us, trying to figure out all the intricacies and the small details that I'd missed out. And because of my poor design choices, the execution from design to code was pretty bad too. Reason number five, wasting time and resources. Because I had to go back and fix multiple design mistakes, the time to develop and deploy this new website was delayed, which ended up costing more money. If I had been clear from the start, I could have saved time and probably some cash too. When we start mapping out a user flow, there are quite a few different elements we need to consider. The entry point. This is where your user enters the flow, where they start. So some examples of this would be via the homepage, a search link, or a feature of an app. We also need to consider user actions. This is what a user does to get through the flow, whether that's clicking a button, filling in a form, or selecting an item. Then come decision points. This is where a user makes a decision that might affect their path. Maybe they have to select one of multiple options. You've also got pages and screens, and these are the individual pages that a user interacts with along their journey. We also have connectors. These are the lines and arrows that connect all your elements together. We also have feedback loops. So these will be information or responses that the user gets based on some of the actions they've taken. These can include confirmation messages, error messages, and notifications. And finally, we have endpoints. So this is the final destination, where they're trying to get to, their goal. A few of these would be finding what they joined your website or app for in the first place, or making a purchase, or completing their profile. When I built that poor website, I hadn't taken the time to properly consider who I was designing for. What did this person actually want to do? And what were their main problems they were trying to solve? It's really easy, and I do this all the time, to go, ooh, I just want to get started and start designing something. But that won't do you any favors in the long run. Even if you spend only a few minutes thinking about the user, it will pay off massively in the long run. For this example, let's quickly create an imaginary person that we're designing for. This is often known as a persona. Let's put a really basic one together now. So who is this for? Let's call him Sir Bobbington III. He wants to book a dog sitter for his two precious pugs, Brenda and Belinda. He's going on holiday for 2 weeks to Italy and unfortunately can't take them with him. Coincidentally, we're designing an app that allows its users to book dog sitters. So now that we've thought about our user, we have some context and some constraints that we can start to work with. So let's create the user flow. You have a few options of how to approach this. I generally start with pen and paper and then transfer that into a digital tool. I put it in the digital tool so it's easier to share with stakeholders, especially if they're remote. I like using Miro, occasionally FigJam, and Freeform from Apple, which is also pretty good. The first thing we need to do is start with the entry point, as will be the landing page of our app. The landing page will probably have some sort of search functionality, and let's stick 3 options in there: dog walking, doggy daycare, and boarding, or dog sitting. Here we have a decision point. From these three options, Sir Bob III will select boarding, as he wants to go away for a couple of weeks. Next, we'll need to consider where Bob lives so that he can find a dog sitter close to him. We'll then need to know how long Bob wants to book the dog sitter for. So we'll use a user interaction element at this point, and a good interaction for this would be a date picker. So Bob will enter a start date and then an end date. Cool, so we know what Bob wants and how long he wants it for. Let's add another user interaction point. Bob clicks search. Now we'll use a feedback loop element where Sir Bob is presented with a list of dog sitters near him available during the dates that he wants. As you can see, your user flows can get quite complex quite quickly. Some best practices to consider when creating user flows. Always start with the user in mind. Understand their needs, goals, and behaviours as well as you can before you start. Define a clear objective for each of your user flows. Understand what you want that user to accomplish by the time they've gone through it. You may have noticed that the different elements I put into the flow have different colours and shapes. These aren't particularly necessary, but they really help me identify quickly at which points in the flow different things are happening. And finally, keep it simple. You may have noticed how simple this user flow was. There were many points along that journey that I could have branched into or probably expanded on other bits too, but I generally try and keep them as simple as possible. The first user flow I mapped out here was for Bob's goal of finding a dog sitter. We could do a separate flow for actually booking the dog sitter, and by breaking them up like this, it makes it much easier to explain certain sections of user journeys to a wider audience. Don't forget, user flows are not set in stone. They're iterative pieces of work. If you discover that your first user flow wasn't right, you can tweak it. You can move things around. You can delete steps. You can add steps. So be prepared to iterate on feedback and insights you get along the way. So after tidying up my crappy work with user flows, I saw a massive increase in signups. I also had a happy client. User flows are just one of many powerful UX techniques you can use. I know that I always implement a user flow now after that horrible experience I had with that website. But there are loads of other techniques you can use too. If you'd like to see some of those, click up here. Until next time, thanks for watching. See you soon.